The unprovoked strike, the silence in Haven's Rest, was different tonight. Captain Elena Vasquez noticed it the moment she walked into Murphy's bar, the kind of establishment that catered to veterans from a dozen different wars across the galaxy. A usual chatter between species had died down to whispers, and more than a few alien patrons had found reasons to leave early. Elena knew why. Word had spread that she was here, and with it came the memories that made even the bravest warrior. Species uncomfortable, Elena chose her usual corner booth, the one that gave her a clear view of all entrances and exits. Old habits from the war years died hard, even 15 years later. The Karathi bartender, a 7-foot-tall being with 4 arms and chitin-like skin, nodded respectfully as he delivered her drink without being asked. Respect tinged with something else. Fear, maybe. Or perhaps just the careful distance that the galaxy had learned to keep from humans, who had seen too much. She was halfway through her whiskey when the young woman approached. Human, maybe 25 years old, with the eager expression of someone who had never seen war firsthand. Elena recognized the type immediately. Journalists, historians, academics who wanted to understand what had happened during the Helix War. Most of them gave up after hearing the first few details. This one looked different, though, more determined. Captain Vasquez? The woman's voice carried the slight accent of someone from the outer colonies. My name is Zara Chun. I'm with the Galactic Historical Archive. I sent you the message about an interview. Elena studied her for a long moment. Zara Chun had been born after the war started, probably never saw the refugee camps or the memorial walls that covered 3 continents on Earth. She belonged to the generation that lived with the peace that Elena's generation had bought with blood and nightmares. Sit down, Elena said finally, gesturing to the seat across from her. You want to know about the war? About why they look at us like that? She nodded toward a table of Helix survivors who had gone completely silent, their reptilian faces turned away, but their large ears clearly listening. Zara activated a small recording device and set it on the table between them. The official records are heavily classified. Most of what the public knows comes from propaganda pieces or alien testimonies that contradict each other. I want to hear it from someone who was there. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. Someone who was there. That's a funny way to put it. She took another sip of her whiskey, feeling the familiar burn that helped dull memories that refused to fade. I wasn't just there, kid. I helped plan some of the operations that made the galaxy decide humans were too dangerous to fight. The reporter leaned forward, her pen already moving across her notepad. Tell me about first contact. How did it all begin? Elana's eyes went distant, seeing not the bar around them, but the bridge of the exploration vessel Aurora Dawn 18 years ago. She had been a communications officer then, young and optimistic about humanity's place among the stars. The universe had seemed so full of possibilities. It was 18 years ago, Elena began, her voice taking on the tone of someone recounting a story that still hurt to remember. I was Lieutenant Vasquez then, serving as communications officer on the Aurora Dawn under Captain Rebecca Martinez. Good captain, fair leader, believed in the best of people. She thought first contact would be humanity's greatest achievement. Zara wrote quickly, trying to capture every word. Around them, the bar had grown even quieter, as if the very walls were listening to a story that had become legend across the galaxy. We had been exploring the Outer Rim territories for months, Elena continued. Earth was expanding rapidly, and the colonial administration needed new worlds for the growing population. We had detected energy signatures from an advanced civilization in the Helix Nebula region. Captain Martinez was excited. Finally, we would meet our equals among the stars. Elena paused, remembering the excitement that had filled the Aurora Dawn's crew when they first detected the massive space stations orbiting Helix Prime. The structures had been beautiful, crystalline formations that seemed to grow rather than be built, housing billions of beings from multiple species, working together in apparent harmony. The Helix Confederacy, Elena said, her voice growing harder. 8 different species that had formed an alliance over 3,000 years ago. They controlled 47 star systems and had technology that made our best ships look like toys. When they responded to our greeting messages, we thought we had found the perfect neighbors. Zara looked up from her notes. The history books say the initial contact went well. Cultural exchanges, technology sharing, even plans for human colonies in Helix space. That's what we thought too, Elena replied. For 6 months, everything seemed perfect. Their ambassador, a being called Prime Coordinator Vex High, visited Earth. Our diplomats went to Helix Prime. We shared music, art, scientific knowledge. They seemed fascinated by human diversity, our adaptability, our emotional range. They said we were remarkably versatile as a species. Elena's hand tightened around her glass. We thought it was a compliment. The old soldier stood up and walked to the bar's observation window. Outside, the space lanes were busy with traffic from dozens of different worlds. Ships from species that now gave human vessels a wide berth, no matter how peaceful the mission. The fear that had started during the war had never really gone away. The colonial administration approved the settlement of Kepler 442b, Elena said, her back still to Zara. It was a beautiful world in Helix space, with perfect atmospheric conditions and rich mineral deposits. The Confederacy had offered it. Freely, said they wanted human neighbors. 75,000 people volunteered for the colony ship New Horizon. Families, children, scientists, teachers, people who just wanted to build something new among the stars. Elena turned back to face the reporter. Her eyes were cold now, like winter on a dead world. I was transferred to the New Horizon as their communications liaison with the Aurora Dawn. We were supposed to escort them to their new home, help establish the first human settlement in alien space. It was going to be historic. Zara had stopped writing. Something in Elena's voice made her stomach tighten with dread. What went wrong? Nothing went wrong, Elena said, sitting back down. Everything went exactly as the Helix Confederacy planned. We just didn't understand the plan until it was too late. The silence stretched between them. Other patrons in the bar had begun leaving, as if they could sense the darkness of the story that was coming. Elena waited until the last alien customer had departed before continuing. 3 days out from Kepler 442b, we detected a massive Helix fleet waiting in orbit. Hundreds of ships, including some designs we had never seen before. Captain Martinez was concerned but not alarmed. Maybe they were there to welcome the colonists, she thought. Maybe it was some kind of ceremony. Elena's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Prime Coordinator Vex High himself came on the communication channel as we approached. He thanked Captain Martinez for bringing such excellent specimens to their research facilities. When she asked what he meant, he explained very calmly that the Helix Confederacy had been looking for the perfect slave species for centuries. Something intelligent enough to be useful, but not advanced enough to be a threat. Zara's pen had fallen from nerveless fingers. They planned this from the beginning? Every moment of it, Elena confirmed. The cultural exchanges were really behavioral studies. The technology sharing was them evaluating our capabilities. The offer of Kepler 442b was bait for a trap. They wanted to see how many humans they could capture at once, how we would react to separation from Earth, whether we would fight or submit. Elena finished her whiskey in one gulp. The alcohol did nothing to wash away the taste of old rage that filled her mouth whenever she remembered that day. The New Horizon was a civilian ship, No weapons, minimal shields designed for colonization, not combat. When the Helix fleet opened fire, our people didn't even have time to send a distress signal. I watched 75,000 human beings die in the space of 10 minutes. Men, women, children who had trusted alien promises of friendship and found only death waiting for them. The reporter was pale now, understanding beginning to dawn on her face. How did you survive? The Aurora Dawn was faster and had military-grade shields, Elena said. Captain Martinez ordered an immediate retreat the moment the first shots were fired. We barely made it out of the system alive. But before we left, Vex-High sent us one final message. He wanted us to know that this was just the beginning. The Confederacy planned to harvest more humans for their experiments. They had learned enough about our biology and psychology to know exactly how to break us. Elena stood up to leave, but Zara grabbed her arm. What happened next? How did Earth respond? The old soldier looked down at the young reporter with something that might have been pity. Next, kid, the galaxy learned why you should never mistake human kindness for human weakness. Next, Admiral Marcus Stone received orders that changed everything. Next, the Helix Confederacy discovered what happens when you make humanity angry. Elena pulled free from Zara's grip and headed for the door. Come back tomorrow if you want to hear the rest. But I warn you, once you know what we did to win that war, you'll understand why they still look at us with fear in their eyes. She walked out into the corridor, leaving Zara alone with her notes and the sudden understanding that the peaceful galaxy she had grown up in was built on a foundation of carefully controlled terror. Outside, the space station's lights reflected off passing ships, each one carrying beings who remembered what humans were capable of when pushed too far. The silence in Murphy's bar was complete now, broken only by the soft hum of life support systems and the distant sound of Zara Chun trying to process what she had just learned. Tomorrow, she would hear the rest of the story. Tomorrow, she would learn why the war had been so savage that even 15 years later, the galaxy still whispered humanity's name in terror. Asterisk, when humans stopped playing by rules, Zara Chun arrived. At Murphy's bar early the next evening, her recorder and notebook ready. She had spent the previous night researching what little public information existed about the Helix War, but most records remained classified at the highest levels. The few details available painted a picture of a conflict unlike any other in galactic history, not just because of its brutality, but because of how completely it had changed the balance of power among the stars. Elena Vasquez was already at her corner table, the same position as before. But tonight she looked older, as if talking about the war had aged her overnight. The bar was nearly empty, except for a lone Karathi merchant in the far corner who kept glancing nervously at Elena before looking away. You came back, Elena said as Zara sat down. I wasn't sure you would after yesterday. I need to know the rest, Zara replied, turning on her recording device. What happened after the Aurora Dawn made it back to Earth? Elena nodded slowly, her eyes focusing on memories that still burned bright after 15 years. The news hit Earth like a nuclear explosion. 75,000 people murdered in cold blood. And for what? Because some alien alliance decided humans would make good slaves. Every news network on every continent carried the story. Within hours, there were riots outside the Helix diplomatic embassy. The old soldier took a sip of her drink, gathering her thoughts. But the riots stopped when President Chun made her announcement. One sentence that changed everything. The Helix Confederacy has declared war on humanity, and we accept. Then she turned over complete military authority to Admiral Marcus Stone with a single directive: end the threat permanently. Zara leaned forward, her pen moving quickly across the page. I've heard of Admiral Stone. The records say he revolutionized human military doctrine. Admiral Stone understood something that the aliens didn't, Elena said. They thought war was about honor, about following rules, about winning with dignity. Stone knew that when someone murders your children, dignity becomes a luxury you can't afford. He assembled a council of experts, Dr. Sarah Kim for biological warfare, Colonel David Park for special operations, Commander Lisa Rodriguez for psychological warfare. Each one a specialist in making war too terrible to continue. Elena stood and walked to the observation window again. Outside, a Helix trade vessel was docking at the station. Even 15 years later, seeing their ships made her hands clench into fists. 8 months, Elena continued. That's how long it took Earth to prepare. 8 months while the Confederacy celebrated their victory and planned their next harvest of human slaves. They expected us to send diplomats begging for peace, or maybe a traditional fleet that would fight by their ancient rules of engagement. They got neither. The reporter looked up from her notes. What did they get instead? Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a predator remembering a successful hunt. They got Operation Nightfall, the largest human fleet ever assembled. 300 ships carrying technologies that Earth had never used in warfare before. I was promoted to captain and given command of the Communications Warfare Division. My job was to make sure the enemy knew exactly what was happening to them and why. Elena returned to her seat, her expression growing darker. The Helix Confederacy expected the first battle to be at their outer defenses, a traditional engagement, where fleets met in open space and slugged it out until one side retreated. Instead, Colonel Park's infiltration teams had been in their space for weeks, setting up what he called dominoes. Dominoes? Zara asked. Supply stations, communication. Relays, civilian infrastructure, Elena explained. Everything that kept their worlds functioning. When our main fleet finally arrived at Helix Prime, Park triggered every sabotage device simultaneously. In the space of 6 hours, 12 Helix worlds lost power, communications, and supply lines. Their military had to choose between fighting U.S. and saving their own people. Elena's voice grew quieter, more intense. But that was just the opening move. Dr. Kim had spent those 8 months studying every species in the Confederacy, mapping their biological weaknesses with a precision that made their own scientists look like amateurs. She developed targeted viruses, not lethal, but incapacitating, each one designed for a specific alien physiology. Zara had stopped writing, her face pale. Biological weapons? Biological weapons, Elena confirmed. But not the kind that kill quickly. Dr. Kim's creations were worse. They made you sick enough to be helpless, but kept you alive to suffer. The Vrex couldn't breathe properly. The Kthani lost their coordination. The Helix themselves developed a fever that made thinking clearly impossible. Entire planetary populations became bedridden within days. The old soldier paused, letting the implications sink in. Around them, the bar's atmosphere felt heavier, as if the very air was remembering the weight of those decisions. The Confederacy sent a message to Admiral Stone, Elena continued, demanded that we follow the galactic conventions. Of warfare, said that using biological weapons against civilians was a crime against sentient life. They wanted us to fight honorably, to give them a chance to win with dignity intact. Elena laughed, and the sound was bitter as poison. Stone's response was broadcast on every frequency in Helix space. He stood in front of a holographic display, showing the debris field where the new horizon had died, and he said exactly 7 words. You forfeited honor when you murdered children. Zara found her voice, though it was barely above a whisper. What happened to prisoners? What prisoners? Elena asked. In the first phase of operations, we didn't take any. Every captured Helix soldier was put to work cleaning up the damage their people had caused, fed the same contaminated food supplies. They had poisoned, housed in the same overcrowded facilities they had planned for human slaves. Colonel Park called it educational reciprocity. The reporter was writing frantically now, trying to capture every detail of a story that was becoming more horrifying with each revelation. How did the other alien species react? Elena's expression grew thoughtful. That's when things got really interesting. The Galactic Defense Council called an emergency session. Representatives from 40 different worlds demanded that Earth be sanctioned for war crimes, that Admiral Stone be arrested and tried for crimes against sentience. They thought they could pressure us into fighting fair. Elena finished her drink and signaled for another. Dr. Kim addressed the council personally. She brought holographic displays showing exactly what the Confederacy had planned for captured humans: dissection, experimentation, selective breeding programs. Then she showed them the biological agents she had developed for the other species. Not just the ones in the Confederacy, but for every species in the galaxy. Zara's pen had stopped moving entirely. She had biological weapons for everyone? Every single species, Elena confirmed. Dr. Kim explained very calmly that humans had spent 8 months studying alien biology, that we now knew how to neutralize any potential threat to our survival. She didn't threaten anyone directly. She just wanted them to understand that if they interfered with our war, they would discover firsthand why the Helix Confederacy was learning to fear the name human. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of the space station systems. The lone Korathi merchant had left some time during the conversation, leaving Elena and Zara alone in the bar. Asterisk. The turning point came at the Battle of Zirian Prime, Elena said finally. The Confederacy's military stronghold, protected by orbital platforms and defended by their best troops. The Helix High Command thought it was impregnable. They were wrong. Elena's eyes grew distant again, seeing battles fought in the darkness between stars. Colonel Park led a team of 50 volunteers in a direct assault on the planet's surface, while our fleet engaged their orbital defenses. But the real attack came from Dr. Kim's final creation, something she called the pacification virus. More biological warfare? Zara asked. The last one, Elena said. A virus that attacked the nervous system, causing temporary paralysis, without permanent damage. Dr. Kim released it into Zarian Prime's atmosphere using captured Helix technology. 2 million Confederacy civilians were neutralized in 48 hours. Not killed, not permanently harmed, just rendered completely helpless. Elena leaned back in her chair, her voice growing matter-of-fact. The Helix military had a choice. Continue fighting and watch their entire population become helpless, or surrender unconditionally to save their people. They chose to surrender. The war was over. But the fear didn't end, Zara observed, looking around the empty bar. No, Elena agreed. The fear was just beginning. Other species had watched us fight, seen how completely we had outfought and outmaneuvered opponents who were supposedly superior in every way. They realized that humans didn't just win through superior firepower. We won by becoming whatever we needed to become. If the situation required biological warfare, we developed it. If it required psychological terror, we mastered it. If it required sacrificing our own moral comfort to ensure our species' survival, we did that too. Elena stood up to leave, but Zara wasn't finished. What happened to you? To the other veterans? The old soldier paused, her expression softening. For the first time, we carried the weight of what we had done. Some of us handled it better than others. Dr. Kim never developed another biological agent after the war ended. Colonel Park retired to a farm on New Terra and hasn't spoken publicly in 10 years. Admiral Stone died 5 years ago, still carrying the responsibility for every decision he made. Elena looked at Zara with something that might have been sympathy. That's why I'm telling you this story, kid. Not because I'm proud of what we did, but because it needs to be remembered. The galaxy learned that humans could be peaceful neighbors or efficient killers, depending on how we were treated. That lesson has kept the peace for 15 years. And if someone tests that lesson? Zara asked. Elena smiled that cold, predatory smile one last time. Then they'll discover that we learned even more about warfare in the years since the Helix War ended. We've studied every species, mapped every weakness, prepared for every possible threat. We didn't become the galaxy's most feared species by accident. We earned that reputation one calculated decision at a time. Elena walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. The Helix Accords are still in effect. The Confederacy pays reparations to the families of everyone who died on the New Horizon. Their military is limited to system defense only. And every year on the anniversary of the massacre, their leaders have to broadcast a formal apology to Earth. That seems harsh, Zara said. Harsh? Elena's voice carried the weight of 15 years of nightmares. Kid, harsh would have been if we had decided to finish what they started. Harsh would have been if we had decided that the galaxy wasn't big enough for both humans and the species that murdered our children. What we did was justice. What we could have done was genocide. Elena walked out into the corridor, leaving Zara alone with her recording and the profound understanding that the peaceful galaxy she had grown up in existed only because humanity had proven it could destroy any threat to its survival. The war had been so savage, so perfectly calculated, that even 15 years later, the very mention of human military capability could empty a bar and send alien traders looking for other ports. Outside the observation window, ships from across. The galaxy moved through the space lanes in carefully maintained order. Each one carried beings who remembered the lesson of the Helix War. Humans could be the best neighbors in the galaxy, or the most terrifying enemies. The choice, as always, belonged to everyone else. The silence in Murphy's bar was complete now, broken only by Zara Chun's quiet breathing as she tried to process the full scope of what she had learned. Tomorrow, she would write her report. But tonight, she sat in the darkness and understood why the galaxy whispered humanity's name in terror, and why that terror had become the foundation of the longest peace in galactic history.